Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Making Milestones podcast. Today's episode is a yearly episode that I like to do, which is the end of year recap, which will be for 2024, obviously. Usually I get this episode out earlier, but this year it is quite late. So I wanted to talk about the year of 2024 and just all the things that happened. And this is like an episode where I'm like shockingly surprised like how many people actually like it, because it's actually gotten like some of the most downloads of any episodes I've done have been my recap episodes. So thank you for enjoying these ones. I'm glad you guys like them, because like it's not necessarily always going to be horsey stuff. A lot of it is, but basically it's just you guys hearing about like the shitstorm that was my year. So I appreciate the fact that you guys enjoy hearing about these kinds of things and that it is a topic that you like, because it's also interesting for me to go back through my year and just like remember what happened, because just it's always so much. This year was like another big year full of things that were just like happening to me and me just going through it. So it's another year of many things happening and lots of changes where like I kind of look back and it's like, wow, I have whiplash. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start out this episode of the podcast by looking at like I'm gonna go through my camera roll basically to just like jog memories. And one of the craziest things about this past year is that like I actually went out for New Year's Eve. So like technically on the first day of 2024, I was like out in downtown Vancouver, like actually being a person and going out. And there's a reason why I didn't do that this year, which we'll get to, because that'll be the final part of the podcast, is recapping like the last part of 2024. But yeah, it's been a doozy, and I'm excited to share with all of you what has gone on this year, because it's been another big year. But I'd say the weirdest part of 2024 is like how I started it, because I'm not like a going out type of person, and that took a lot of energy out of me. But I was like, I want to do something new. I'm just going to try this out and see what happens. And yeah, we're going to go out and we're going to be like party people. And now I'm like, this year I was like, let's stay home and make like candles. So I guess you could say I aged a lot this year. But yeah, let's jump into it and start with January. Okay, so January, I started the year off by uncharacteristically partying, and then I decided that that probably wasn't for me, so I didn't do it again this year. January overall was like a relatively slow month until it wasn't. I was riding more than I am now. I can see on these photos and videos. And like the weather looked similar to what it is right now. It was like unseasonably warm, and we had a drier year in January last year, which was kind of nice. So I was working with my horses more, and I was trying to be off to like a good start in my new year, because 2023, the end of that year was really rough. Went through like the craziest breakup that I ever have. Like honestly, the freaking craziest person I still to this day I think I've interacted with, which I'm sure of you, like all of you who are horse people, which is probably most, if not all of you, you know that's a bold claim, because there's a lot of crazy horse people. This guy was not even a horse person, and he was fucking psychotic. Like the craziest person I have ever dated, and hopefully will ever date again. Because if I run into that bigger red flag again, I think I'm just gonna give up. But anyways, that year ended off really crazy, and I was in like a bad place for a few months. And then like in the new year of 2024, I was kind of hitting this point where I'd like healed and I'd kind of processed a lot of that trauma, and I was doing better. I could see that my skin cleared up. I was feeling good about myself. I was feeling like I wanted to try to look good for myself. And I was getting into a stride where I was like feeling good self-esteem wise, and I was finding things that I like to do and like finding ways to keep myself busy and like do things that were rewarding and enriching for me. Whereas like in the past, like especially like when I'm starting relationships or I'm in a relationship that like always at the beginning, and by the beginning I mean like honestly like the first 6 months for a lot of them, or like yeah, around that mark. But I'm always like really excited about the person, and like this is something that I'm trying to break, which we're going to get into further into this episode, where it was like I would prioritize relationships too much, and I'd kind of put doing stuff for myself by myself on hold just to like preserve this type of relationship with the person. And it led to me like not finding things that brought me joy without that person in my life, which is not very healthy. So I was kind of relearning and like grabbing onto that reality of things and really like starting to prioritize myself and make myself happy without having a person in my life. And I was starting to feel good about it at the beginning of the year, where I'd kind of gone through the ugliness of the healing process, and I was starting to do stuff for myself, by myself, and just stuff that just that I enjoyed. So January, kind of the start of that, where I was processing all of that, and I was doing some training. Like I was working a lot with trailer training with some clients' horses at the beginning of that year, and that's like one of my favorite things to work on, oddly enough. And I was having a lot of fun with that. So January was kind of like a recalibration period where I was coming back alive after the winter. Because for me too, I have a really hard time through the winter when it's really dark, and I'm going through the parts of the winter where it is like just the daylight's gone so quickly. Even if you have good weather, which we usually don't here in the Pacific Northwest, usually it's quite rainy. And yeah, so I have a hard time with how dark it gets in the winter, and then it just makes me depressed. And then like after the winter solstice period, I'm starting to feel really good, and I'm kind of like reawakening and coming back alive. And this is like a yearly thing for me. So January kind of represents that, because it's like after the winter, after the holidays, you've gotten through like the holiday rest period, and you're kind of coming back alive and kind of anticipating spring. And that's what January was, or like much of it. And then like partway through January, we finally got like the first snow of that year, like in like that winter, I should say. And we're kind of in a similar stage to that now, although I don't even know if we're going to get snow this year, which is kind of scary. So we still haven't gotten snow. I'm hoping that we get some, but it doesn't look like we're going to. And January more or less was like pretty nondescript until the end of the month, which we'll get to. Milo helped out with like a movie shoot where they needed to borrow a horse for like a cowboy shoot, and he just kind of stood around, and it happened to be during this really bad cold spell. Like it had been warm all winter with like unseasonable warmth, and then all of a sudden we got like -15 and wind chill. So like for the filming, I had to be out in the cold in -15 all day. And that really sucked, but it was interesting nonetheless. And then like also that like in January 2024, there was some really beautiful sunrises, sunsets, really nice crisp mountain views, especially when it went through this cold snap. And I was getting up early in the mornings to go walking with my mom and the dogs. So I was up through a lot of that. And then finally mid-January, we got a huge dumping of snow where we got like a foot of snow overnight. And it was a lot of snow, and that was kind of like our big winter thing where we went from like 0 to 60 right quick, where there had been like no snow at all, and then all of a sudden it was just like bam, snow. The dogs loved it. My dog Phoebe really loves snow, so she was having a blast in the snow and just like running through it. And when she's in the snow, she looks like a seal, like one of those, like I think it's a harbor seal. It's like one of those spotty seals, but she looks like a seal, and it's super cute. So that was lovely. But then the not so lovely part is that right after the snowfall, like I go out to check out on the horses, and Banksy's like 3-legged lame. So obviously I like freak out. When they're lame like that, you always like hope it's an abscess, because that's like the easiest thing to deal with. But he had some swelling like in the tendons on his legs. So I was like, oh no. And I thought he tore something. And it was also on a weekend, of course. So I had to pay an emergency call. And like at this point, like the snow is still coming down. I should also let people know. So like it was really snowy. There was a lot of problems on the roads, and it was just like a really bad time for trying to get a vet out. And like also my horses, this is before I moved, they're located like at the end of a property, like down a kilometer-long stretch of road. Sorry, I'm just moving around because my knee is hurting. So like the vet has to drive down there, and like in other circumstances, I could have just walked the horse down to the vets. But like obviously I don't want to walk my horse who has supposed tendon injury through a foot of snow. But luckily the vet was able to get down to me, and he brought like the ultrasound equipment so they could check if it's a tendon tear, because like he saw the leg and agreed that it was something tendon related, which isn't what I wanted to hear, but I already had a feeling. And then he said the ultrasound equipment sometimes doesn't work when it's below 4 degrees Celsius, which it was. Fortunately, it worked. We could see that he had a really, really small tear to his deep digital flexor tendon. So it was nice because I caught it early enough where we saw what it was. But then the problem was that since he's in a like a foot deep of snow. That's like one of the worst things for tendons is to go through like deep footing, especially where they can slip and slide. So unfortunately, what this meant is that I had to move him to a different property, but or not, sorry, I'm jumping ahead. First, we tried to build him a little paddock in the field where he could have like his own little section with like the shelter and just be less space that he couldn't be going bombing around the field and trying to chase after the other horses. And my plan was to keep Milo in this little paddock section with him so that he wasn't alone, or like pogo or something. But since it was getting dark so early, like I bought all this fencing equipment to finish fencing it, and I like hot wired the fencing, and I made like this little pen around the field. So it was dark out, and like Milo's kind of weird in the dark. He has a cataract on his left eye, so I don't know if that has something to do with it, but he's kind of weird in the dark. So I finished fencing them in. They're in there. They have hay, they have their water. And then Milo just randomly decides to just run through the fence. So he runs through the electric fence, takes it all down, breaks a bunch of fence insulators, and all the fencing that I just spent like an hour and a half doing is just down and broken. So then I'm like literally about to cry because it's like 9 p.m. and it's pitch black outside, and I'm like, shoot, my plan was to like leave Banksy in this pen, and now we can't do it because everything is broken. And so I ended up having to wait until the morning, and then I hauled Banksy off property to a friend's place. We got stuck in the snow with a trailer, which was really stressful. I ended up having to unload him. I had to unhitch, and a friend brought their trailer, and then I had to walk him down the driveway with this injury that he doesn't really want to put weight on because the trailer wouldn't make it down to where my horses are in the field. And then he loaded in their trailer, luckily, and we went to my friend's place. My friend's place didn't have like the most ideal setup for what I wanted, but I wanted to get him out of that field as soon as possible so he's not walking around in deep footing. So he ended up having to go somewhere where he had to just be in a stall, and like the stalls had full walls, so he couldn't see anyone, and it was really stressful. So I left him there for a day, but he was so stressed that he was just like pacing, and he like had diarrhea, and like he was coping like good, all things considered. It's not like he was pacing into a lather or anything, but I could just see in his eyes that he was not having a good time. So then I moved him again, and I moved him to the place that I now live at, but at the time I didn't know I was going to move to. And he stayed there in like a paddock with half walls and then like a half sized turnout area. And that was much better for him. And it wasn't a super long like rehab period because the injury was like really minor. So if he only had to be there for like, I think it was like a month or a month and a half, not super long, and he ended up healing really well. We rescanned the leg and it looked like perfect. You couldn't even really tell there had ever been an injury there at the time they rescanned it. The only reason the vet could even find anything is because she just knew where to look. It was a different vet that rescanned him. So anyways, that was January. While Banksy was on rehab, I taught him how to paint, which was pretty fun. So he painted 2 paintings. I need to do more of that with him now. So there will probably be more painting this year, but that was really fun. Also in January, I went to go visit my best friend Amy when she was visiting like in Whistler, which is about 2 hours from my place. Big ski mountain that people from not around here still might know about. Amy's now moving in with me in April of this year, so we've kind of come full circle, which is very exciting. But yeah, January was quite the month. And then in February, I kind of started the process of like getting Juniper kind of going under saddle, where I'm like introducing the mounting block, and I was leaning over her and doing all that stuff. And she did really, really well with it. And I was super proud of her. And that was really fun and rewarding to like work with a Mustang and have them like accept me being on their back for the first time without like any ropes or restraints, and where she could totally leave and whatnot. It was like super, super cool. Made me really happy. And it was kind of like a full circle moment where it's like I've had these horses where I've been putting all this work into them, and now I'm kind of like seeing them pay off. So that was really fun. I also started working on with them more on like oral medication behaviors and needle behaviors, which they did really well with. And yeah, overall it was like really fun. I did a lot of advocacy work that month too. I was protesting a lot. for like honestly just like against our government and like where they're sending tax dollars, because a lot of it was going to war efforts and still is, and I was not okay with that. So like a lot of those months were protesting and like driving into the city and stuff, which I honestly do not do very much. I tend to avoid the city. Like, I mean, people who aren't from here and who come to visit, or if they're city people, they love Vancouver. And it is like, as far as cities go, it is a nice city, but the city life ain't for me. So I was just doing that for like protesting purposes. Anyways, February, Banksy came home like midway through February and was able to like start his rehab. So I was riding him again. I was riding Milo, and we're just kind of bopping around and having fun. And I was riding a lot more then than I am now. And the reason for that really is just because like since moving, like my horses have had a lot of time off, and I've been doing groundwork, and I've also just been kind of going through it again, which we'll get to. Don't worry, we got to get through all this here. But yeah, so February is kind of there's like nothing that super stands out in February, where it's mostly just like chilling, doing regular horse things, starting to get them in more regular work. So the weather was actually quite good all month. And then like as we headed into March, the days are getting longer. I'm feeling more energetic. I'm starting to really hit a stride with like finding things that I like. I started hiking and going for walks more. And then like the more I started to really like prioritize doing it, because I started having like this checklist where like there are certain things that I wanted to do every day or close to it. And like one of them was like going for a walk. And then the other was like stretching every day and journaling every day, even if it's only like one word or one sentence. And I was doing really well with that. And then like the more I went walking, the more I realized how much better and like more energetic I felt after. So then I started prioritizing hiking more and just getting out to new places. And just like, yeah, like it's slowly expanding, where you start small, where it's like my walk can only, like, it can literally just be a 10-minute a day walk. It doesn't need to be anything crazy. It doesn't need to be anything super long. It can literally just be 10 minutes. And then that made it a really attainable goal, which made it easier to accomplish. So that's kind of what I did, where it was just like start off with a really small attainable goal that even on a day where you're feeling really stressed out or really tired, that you can still accomplish, and then gradually expand from there. And that's exactly what I did. Is I started small with an attainable goal, and then I started doing more and more. And now I'm at the point where I hike often. I've only missed one day this month with going on like walks, and most of my hikes have actually been quite long, or like like a lot, like quite long in the sense that they're a lot longer than what I was doing before. And there's been like a huge rate of improvement with that because I've started with attainable goals. So that part was really, really great. And then I also started getting plants and setting up like my plant area of my house. And I still have plants. A lot of the plants that were at my old house died. So I do have like a new set of plants, but I'm doing my best and I do really like them. And my plan this year for the spring is to start like a much better garden and just try to plan it better. In March, I also moved Harlow to the place that I now live so that I could start riding her more regularly. So she lived there for a few months, and I got her back into work there. And like these are just kind of like full circle moments where looking back at it, it was like interesting. So I'm getting like a sneak peek at what my life is going to be now, but like on a more consistent basis, where it's not where I'm having to drive somewhere else to go do these things. And that's pretty cool. So I think that's really, really neat that it's like been something like that, where you can just get like snippets of like how your life is going to change throughout the year. And like at the time that you're like looking at like when those moments are happening, you don't even necessarily realize that it's like a big change that's going to be happening in your life. But yeah, March was a good month. It was the month where I started really getting out and like doing lots of things and like living for myself and enjoying the days, enjoying the sun. And just I can see how much more active I was being compared to like how I was before, when I was going through a stage where I just wasn't feeling good about myself, and where I was kind of in a place where I just didn't want to do anything, where I felt like I was in a period of burnout and just wanted to like sit and rest, and I wasn't prioritizing going out and going on adventures. But then the more I started to go on these adventures, the more I wanted to do them. And I started doing like all these things, like tidying up my house, tidying up my space, doing all these things just to try to improve like my life on a day-to-day basis and start to feel really good about living. And I also started to get Phoebe out more with me on like all these hikes, which she came on a lot of them as is, but then like when I was seeing how much she enjoyed them too, it just gave me yet another incentive to want to go out and do these things. I also started prioritizing more stuff with like going out with friends and like making plans with friends and like reaching out and stuff, because honestly, like I haven't super been the type of person to want to reach out and plan those, because if people were like didn't want to or they'd say no, I'd kind of just give up. And even if they had a good reason, it's not even like I took it like personally. It was just like, oh, well, like, what's the point in like asking them to hang out again? And I would stop. So now I've kind of hit the point where it's like, screw it, I'm just going to do these things. And if people say no, they can say no. I'll just keep asking. Like, obviously, not repeatedly on the same day or anything, but like, where I'm going to just ask as I'm doing things and they can opt in or opt out. Then April hits, the weather's getting more consistently better, and I'm hiking more. I'm starting to feel a lot better about myself. I'm getting more into like wearing the stuff I want, like thrifting stuff that I like, which I was already thrifting a lot, but I'm going to the extreme even more now, where I'm just getting stuff and I'm just trying new outfits and wearing things that I would have not necessarily been brave enough to wear in the past. And just really living my life and starting to embrace more like doing what you want without worrying about judgment from others and not like worrying about other people's thoughts and opinions and how that might impact like your behavior. Still going on lots of hikes. I was actually driving further for hikes now and just checking out more new places and taking my horses to the place I live at now to like free jump and stuff. So again, lots of full circle moments where I was kind of coming here lots repeatedly without even necessarily knowing that it was going to be this thing where I end up living there. Another really fun part of April is that I threw my mom a surprise party for her 60th birthday, which was really fun. And she had some students that came out like with their new baby to visit her, and that was really special. The other thing that I did too, like for her 60th, is I flew my brother out to come visit her. And like, cause he moved to another province and she didn't know he was coming. So we surprised her with that too. And that was really special because she was super excited and it made her really happy. And like, it was a really fun time where it was a good moment, like seeing how happy someone else was made because of those things. Like it was just nice. So I was really grateful. And then I also got to meet these really cute 2 German Shepherd puppies when I went to Tractor Supply Co. So that was also another fun moment. April was like during the flower bloom as well. So that's another thing that kind of like makes me have more energy, is just seeing all the flowers come back to life. I went to the Tulip Festival, which was really fun. At this point, I had like met a guy on a dating app that I was seeing, and that was a regret that we're going to talk about further into this podcast. But I went to the Tulip Festival with him and then also with a friend, and it was really fun. And then I went on this beautiful road trip in May to the Rocky Mountains. I found the jawbone of an elk and like a partial skull of an elk. I didn't take the partial skull because they'd cut the antlers off and it was just like the skull cap of the skull. So I just took the jawbones. But it was beautiful. I saw like the most stars I've ever seen at night. I stayed in a really cool rural part right under the Rocky Mountains. It was just absolutely beautiful, and it just made me really think about how much I love my province and just all of these road trips that I want to go on all these places that I want to explore, and like how I'm going to do those things. And just, yeah, it just kind of the direction that I want to move my life into. And like looking back at these photos, like they're so beautiful. I had such a good time. And even though it was with like a person that's not going to be my forever person, it was still a really nice time. And I really enjoyed it. So I'm definitely going to go on a road trip like that again and just continue doing what I want, as we all should. And I encourage everyone to do the same, where it's like, if you feel like going and doing something, honestly, just go do it. Whether you can do it with someone or not, just go do it. Don't wait to always have someone with you. Otherwise, you might miss out on some really cool moments in your life. So like literally just go do it, guys. Do your thing. Go and do the fun thing. Don't wait for other people to do it with you. Anyways, came back from that in May, and then I was hauling my horses to my new place a lot without knowing yet that it was going to be my new place. So that was pretty cool. And just like starting to take them out more, which I'm really enjoying like looking at all that stuff, because like I like looking back, like I like initially I would have felt like I did basically nothing with my horses and that I wasn't doing enough, but like looking back on it now, I can see that like I was doing a lot of things with them and that it was actually really great and I was doing better than I thought I was. So I'm going to keep keep on doing that. And like my goal is going to be to do more trail rides and stuff and like record more trail rides, like wear my GoPro more. Sorry, that's my chair. I always worry when I move in my chair that you guys are just going to think I'm like farting on camera or something. So if anyone's thought that, just let me know. Um, but yeah, so looking back on it now, I can see that I actually did do like a lot more with my horses than I thought I did. And I thought that I'd kind of slacked off another year. Not even that it's slacking off. Like that's a really self-defeating way of putting it. I thought that I'd been less active with the horses than I had been. Anywho, so I did a lot of little road trips. I wandered around a lot and I went to a lot of neat places. I rode way more than I thought I did, which makes me really happy to see. And yeah, there's a lot of fun little road trips. And like, I honestly plan to do more this year because I just have so many places I want to go. And I just got to start doing them because it's like, sorry, that's my cat brushing up against. And for once, it's not queso. It's actually Scout that did that for once. 99.9% of the time, it's going to be queso. So yeah, then I did some beach trips with the horses, which was absolutely wonderful. I went to the beach quite a lot last year, actually, and set Banksy free on the beach for the first time, which was really fun and interesting because like I didn't really know what he was gonna do. And that's like always a concern if he just decided to like piece it. Obviously, that would suck. But he didn't. He did see a bike going down the path on the dike, like way further up. And he followed it a little bit, but then he turned around and came back. And I was like, bro, you're a horse. Why are you trying to leave? Why are you doing this to me? And yeah. Okay, a less fun part about May is that my boyfriend at the time, his whole building had bed bugs, and I learned that bed bugs love me. They love me. I got bit 12 times in one night. And bed bugs in my head, I had only like known them from like that saying where it's like sleep tight, don't let the bed bugs bite. And to me, like bed bugs felt like a mythical creature. Like they really did. They felt like a freaking mythical creature that was just in that type of story. Wrong. They are a real thing. And like I knew they were a real thing, but they felt like a mythical creature is what I'm getting at. And they are in fact real. They love me. Mosquitoes don't love me. So like I'm usually the a-hole that like if you're sitting beside me and mosquitoes like you, they will literally just all maul you and stay away from me because mosquitoes don't like my blood. So I got a taste of what it's like to be someone that is liked by blood-sucking creatures that want to attack you, and it was not a good taste. So I hated that. Really not fun. And then it also just made me really pissed off at like landlords as like leeches and people like I should say bad landlords, like the landlords that don't take care of the people in them. And it made me mad because it was like a lower income building where a lot of low income families live and where it's like cheap, probably some of the cheapest housing you can find in the valley. And I felt they were taking advantage of people. It made me pretty upset. And I was not here for it. So I kind of went off on an anti-capitalist rant about how predatory some of these people are. And it made me angry. And then I was like to my, at the time, boyfriend, I was like, you should not live here. This is messed up. And they're taking advantage of you. And then he ended up moving in with me, which in hindsight, yes, everyone would be like, Shelby, that's a bad idea. You shouldn't invite someone to move in with you that early. And you would be correct. But I was trying to be a nice person. And I just wanted to get him out of bedbug area. And also selfishly for me, like I didn't want to have to be anywhere near bed bugs to go see someone. So that's kind of where we were at. I know it was a mistake. We're going to just ignore that and agree that sometimes I do be a stupid bitch. Anyways, that's the bedbug story. I also went on some trail rides. Like I've always wanted to go to Golden Years Park here in the Fraser Valley. So I took Banksy and Milo to Golden Years Park and I rode Banksy bridleless on a trail for the first time, which was super awesome. It was a lot of fun. Really enjoyed it. And yeah, all in all, good time. And that's like another thing of evidence that I did, in fact, ride my horses a lot. I went on a lot of mountain trails, so there's like a lot of little fun things of me going up mountain trails with my truck and just checking out some really cool and beautiful new places. And like I'm a huge mountain girl. Like I love the mountains. They make me super happy. It's kind of where my heart lies, is in the mountains. So being able to go on that many road trips up the mountains was a real treat in 2024, where I just got to discover so many beautiful places where I was like, wow, I think this is like the prettiest place I've ever seen. And it just kept changing, where it was like, I think this is the prettiest place I've ever seen. In June, I sold Gala, who was like the little project filly that I got. My initial plan was to keep her until I could start her under saddle, but then like financially, it just wasn't going to be the best plan. So what I did is I found her a home that was like pro positive reinforcement and was going to take their time with her and start her nice and slowly and keeps their horses for life. So that's the type of home that she went to, and she's obviously still there and she's doing really well. They changed her name to Pippa. And yeah, that's where she at now. And that was really nice and rewarding, because like they loved her, and when she arrived there, they said she was like awesome and that she settled in really well. And it was just like this really nice thing where they were like ecstatic because they bought her sight unseen. Anyways, next through July, I did another beach trip with the horses, which was really fun. And this was also gearing up to the Olympics, which for those of you who don't know, like I co-founded a welfare organization called the Alliance for Horse Welfare and Sport. And we'd been like leading up to the 2024 Olympic campaign, where we were trying to make them adopt policy changes alongside the French Parliament and other equine welfare organizations, which they did not adopt. So we were just campaigning throughout the Olympics when that happened. And like that was a really crazy busy time where like my posts about the Olympics got a lot of traction, and there was a lot of super angry people. And of course, like since they didn't adopt any of those welfare things, it didn't go at all how you would have wanted it to. And like to me, it almost felt like they were making a mockery of people by not doing these things, and like that, like they just really didn't care, because it was just such poor examples of welfare that it was like to the point where it felt like it was ridiculous, like where they were like making a mockery of things. And I just really, I really didn't like it. It really rubs me the wrong way. And I expressed this like frustration and whatnot for all of that, because oh man, I made so many posts about the Olympics, but it was a stressful time because there was just a lot of anger. This was also during the time where Charlotte Dujardin had that whipping video released and then was like exposed, and that was a big deal too, where like people were freaking out about that. And like no matter what side you were on, basically it was like someone's gonna be angry about the side that you take for that. And like for me, like obviously I don't agree with like what she did in the video where she's like repeatedly whipping a horse, but I did feel like that the level of outrage that she faced was more to do with the fact that she's like a woman than really anything else. And I don't love that. Like I wish that there's a level of accountability that was held like across all types of people, and I don't really find that that's the case. But with that said, like I'm glad that they at least used her to make an example of other people, but I don't really think it was actually with the intent of like improving horse welfare in any way. I think it was trying to placate people who've been complaining about horse welfare. So yeah, January is a really big month for that. Got a ton of hate mail. Ended up being very disheartened by like the sheer number of people who were willing to like defend just like appallingly bad horsemanship. Because like when I'm choosing photos to talk about horse welfare, I try to choose ones where it's like very obviously bad, because if it's even like on the fringes of not being like extremely obvious where the horse is making a severe pain face, people are always going to argue and they're going to tell you that you're wrong. So to avoid that, what I try to do is I try to choose like really severe examples. And it's so frustrating when you choose those examples of what like looks like very clear pain face, just to see the amount of people who are willing to excuse it, or even like examples of like really, really harsh bit setups and like really, really harsh equipment, or the horse has a bleeding mouth, or the horse's mouth is like gaping open as the rider pulls on it, and seeing people defend those things like that was really disheartening because you kind of just are sitting there and you're like, wow, people really will defend anything. Like they'll defend anything. It doesn't really matter. Like they're just desperate to make excuses for any people who are at the top of the sport. And it's really disheartening. So like the Olympics really brought out a lot of that in me, and honestly the Olympics was really fatiguing to me for that reason. So July was a big month because of the Olympic posting, and then obviously that continued into early August. July was also when I decided I was going to be moving and where I gave notice to my past landlord, and then we started the process of packing everything to move and stuff. So that was a busy month, and then this was kind of the process where like that's where my summer kind of shit hit the fan, where I was doing all this content creation for the Olympic stuff. And then I was also packing for the move, which if you've ever tried to move a bunch of horses to a new place, like stuff like taking down shelters, packing all their things, nothing makes you realize like how many animals you have and like how much work horses actually are, quite like moving does. And that really exposed some shit for me where I was just like, wow, this is so much work. I never want to move again. And then I was just like at a point then where I was like, okay, so like if I move now, I want this to be like the last time that I move until so when I move from the place I'm at now, what I'm trying to say is that I want it to be somewhere that like I'm buying for myself and that I'm planning to stay at, because like uprooting my life, like where I move, I want to make it like my sanctuary, like my place. And I feel like with renting, I haven't really been able to fully do that because like the amount of money, like even practicality wise, just the amount of money that you have to put in to do certain things when you're moving, like it's not practical to do with stuff that like with a place that you're not going to stay at forever or that doesn't belong to you. So for example, putting down a bunch of aggregate to make like a track system, that doesn't make sense to do when you're not owning the place, because then you're putting thousands or tens of thousands of dollars into like into stuff for a property that's not yours. So for me to like really put my heart and soul into a property and set it up exactly how I would want it to and do everything that way, I would have to own the property. And I'm not there yet, obviously. So like I really just don't want to move until I'm at a place where the property is like I'm moving to a property that I'm buying. And like this might be a pipe dream, but with buying, even like I want the place that I buy to be the place that I intend to stay at. Like I really wouldn't ideally want to have the idea where it's like this is going to be your starting property, where you're going to get this property and you're just going to have it to start out, and then you're going to move somewhere else. Like this is just your property to get into the housing market. Like I would prefer not to do that. That's not really what I want to do. So yeah, I was like, I never want to move again. So the Olympic stuff continued into August, and like lots of drama there, and like my page got a lot of hits, and it did really help boost my reach online, which is good. And I know like that makes you sound so narcissistic and pretentious, but really like the stuff on social media and like my reach and like how many people view my posts and share my posts, like it really does help. It's a part of like my livelihood now. It's a part of my career now. So like that was a pretty big like 2 months for me from that regard. And I'm really grateful for that. So it was helpful, but it was so exhausting, and it was so like emotionally burning out myself, because like I just had to deal with like things that I found so triggering, where I feel like people were deliberately being dense and like they were trying to not see things for what they are, and also we're just like really adversarial as a result, which is always frustrating. So that was kind of like the first part of August, and then honestly the rest of August was basically just moving and like packing stuff, getting rid of old things, selling things I don't need, getting the horses' shelters taken down, moving the shelters over to the new place, watching the new track be built at the new place, which like my horses' track system in their turnout area, I didn't pay to build that. My landlords were super nice and they did that for me, which is amazing. Because like I was saying, I can't really justify doing that myself. So that was great. And then I also thrifted like a bunch of like new furniture. I found stuff for free on Marketplace, and I refinished a bunch of furniture for my new place, which was really fun. And I was able to like make it myself like make it my own, I should say, because it was really exciting to me to like have this place of my own and like get to decorate it how I wanted to. And just like it was a big step for me as a person that I was really excited about, and I'm glad I did it. And like I said, I definitely like rushed the whole moving in with a partner thing, and that was a bad idea in hindsight. But at the same time, I also don't really know that I regret it, because it got me into the place that I'm in now, and it's been a good move for me and it's made me happy. So like I feel like it was a good thing for me, despite the fact that it's like I still made a mistake by pushing it too quickly. It was still good. So it was kind of a lesson in some ways, but it was a lesson that was like totally worth the difficult parts of the lesson that I learned from in order to do. But we're going to get into that soon because we're almost at September now. So August was literally all just like moving, getting the horses over for like mid-August, end of September. I was also like shopping for like a wedding dress and stuff, not a wedding dress, for stuff for my friend's wedding and stuff. And that was really great because it was like one of my best friends since like grade 1 was getting married, and that was really exciting. So I got to go to like the bachelorette party in early September, and that was really fun. It was like really chaotic because like what happened was that I did like a seminar in Ohio with Bree McDonald of Equine Haven LLC. And so I did that. And then I was back for like, I think 4 days, at which point like all the horses had been moved over and like stuff was still getting moved to the new place. So I got back on September 1st. And then I was back for like 4 days, and then I had to go to the bachelorette party. And so that was really, really, really hectic, but it was so much fun and I had a great time. And it's really nice when you have like a friend who is marrying someone that treats them well and that deserves them and that they deserve, and that like it's just all happy and dandy because of that. And like having that be like the first big wedding that I go to for a friend was nice, because I've thought about it too, where it's like with friends whose boyfriends I haven't liked, where if they got married to them, it would be a really difficult situation to be in. So I was just happy, and that was really fun. So that was like very early September. This is like after basically everything had gotten settled into the new place, more or less. There's still like a ton of unpacking to do. Like the horses were over there, the shelter was set up, and yeah, the worst of things was more or less over. But again, still 0 out of 10, do not recommend moving with horses. So like most of September, other than like me going away to have fun at a bachelorette party, was all about just like settling stuff in, getting everything moved in, having it be like a situation where we're getting settled and having that be fun. And like getting new furniture, filling spots in the house with stuff that I need, and all that jazz. So that was most of September. I saw lots of deer at the new place, which is fun. Sorry, I'm just looking at photos and it was fun. And yeah, it was really, really nice. So that was great. But like, so kind of cycling back a little bit, which to share the story of like context wise of like the lesson that I've learned from like this relationship that ended. Even before the move, like there was things that I was noticing that I was like frustrated about, where I felt that there was like communication issues, where my needs weren't really being taken seriously, and where I felt like there was a lack of care for like the needs that I was expressing and stuff, and just like stuff wasn't being done, where I was saying like, hey, I'm noticing these things in the relationship that are bothering me, like can you fix it, or like or trying to talk about them even, and just having it be brushed off as like, oh no, it's just like the stress of the move, there's a lot going on. And like it was really stressful. And like I warned him about this. I said like moving a farm is going to suck. It's going to be like the worst move that you ever had, because there's so much stuff to move. And I was like, I want to warn you in advance because I don't want you to get into this and then regret it. And he's like, no, it's fine. Like I have tons of friends who will help us, and like you don't need to hire people, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, if you're sure. But like I said that a bunch of times. And then it ended up being a situation where he didn't have as many people that he said that he would come through. So there was stuff that wasn't getting done done in a timely manner that I needed done, like taking down the horses' shelters, which he said that he could have friends that would help with that and that I didn't need to hire anyone. But it ended up being a situation where I should have, and I shouldn't have gone with his word because he ended up being kind of resentful about the amount of work that it was and frustrated with me when I was like, oh, well, you said that these people could come and help with this and now they're not. And it wasn't that I felt entitled to their help. It's that he had said that they would, and he's like, oh no, my friends will come through. Like, I promise you, you don't have to worry about it. And then I found that part really frustrating because I felt that that wasn't super fair to me to say that and like reassure me that they would come through and then not have them come through. But like the bigger things were that like after about 3 months into like us being officially into a relationship where we've been dating, like in a relationship for 3 months, not just dating, I started to notice a shift in how I was being treated, where he was getting way more impatient with me, way more frustrated with me, kind of dismissive of me and my feelings, and like making jokes that I personally feel like are tired, old, stupid jokes, like, oh, the old ball and chain and stuff. Because in my opinion, if you feel that way about your partner, the joke is actually on you, because you shouldn't be with someone who you're already tired of in 3 months. Like, either that says something about your capacity for love and the lack of it, or it says something about the people you choose, because you're choosing people that you can't stand within 3 months. If you're already feeling like they're a ball and chain within 3 months, you've chosen to be with the wrong person, and that's embarrassing. And I said this much in the relationship. Like, I was like, I hate that. I was like, I think that's really stupid. If you already feel that way 3 months in, that's ridiculous. Like, what is there to look forward to? I don't want to be with someone who feels that way about me ever, much less this early in, because it's not like we've been dating or like married for 40 years or something, and like you're just getting tired of someone. And even then, like, I don't think that's a thing. And with someone that you actually love, you don't get tired of them. There might be aspects of the relationship that change as you get really comfortable with each other, but it doesn't get like that. And then also there was like a lack of help around the house and just like a general messiness. And like, don't get me wrong, like, I'm not a very organized person. I have ADHD. I can be like a messy person. But it was like to the level where it reminded me of living with my brother when he was super depressed and literally did nothing. And like, you don't want your partner to remind you of your brother, especially in like a bad way, where it's not like, oh, my brother is super protective of me and treats me well and has taught me how men should respect women. No, it wasn't like that. It was like, you're reminding me of how I felt like there was this perspective in my family for a while where it was like the woman's default position to have to do these things. And like, other people were noticing it too, because like, I've been in relationships where I've been emotionally abused and gaslit and treated like I'm being crazy when I express my concerns. So when I had other people be like, oh no, like, I've noticed that too, where he just always seems annoyed with you. Like, my best friend mentioned that to me, and she's not even from around here. So it was like within the first 3 or 4 times that she'd met him when she was visiting. And she's like, she's like, I don't like how he's talking to you. And he would keep writing it off as the stress of the move. And me being the idiot that I am, I wanted to believe that. So then after all the initial stressors of the move, and we have like everything moved in, it's September, we're in, like, I'm still bringing up some of these things where I was just like, well, this is still ongoing and like nothing's changed. So I brought up the lack of cleaning being done around the house on his part, like him treating me like I'm a burden and making me not feel loved, and like his behavior making me feel like he likes me less than he did at the beginning, which shouldn't be the case, especially this early on. And he's still being dismissive about it. I'm like, oh no, I'm just super burnt out from the move, blah, 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 and like work, this, that, the other thing. And like, at this point, it's pissing me off, to be honest, because like, I run my own business. I had to move all of my product inventory. I had to move my horses. I was the one loading them, hauling them, doing all this stuff, moving a bunch of my stuff. And it's like, yes, he helped with the move. That's not to downplay it. He helped quite a bit, but not as much as he thinks he did. He's inflating how much he's helped versus other people, and also inflating how much is on his plate versus other people, because he works a regular job where it's like salary pay, and he's on contract, but it's like, not honestly, like the amount of hours per day was probably like an average of like 6 hours per day. And once he's done work, he's done, unless he's on call, which is only like once a month or like once every 4 weeks or something like that. Anyways, so I was like, I'm frustrated because I've moved my entire product inventory. I had to redo inventory. I have products that I can't find now because they're packed. And all through this move, I was doing content creation for the Olympics. I was filming videos. I was doing articles. I had to finish my book. I had to do emails and interact with customers. I had to pack and ship orders. I had to get return set up. I had to order in new products. I had to take care of my own horses and do all of their day-to-day chores and make sure they're okay. I had to take my dog for walks. I had to take care of all of my animals. And yes, these are all responsibilities that I've willingly took on, but the responsibilities and stressors in my life that he was not taking into account. It was all about him and his stressors and what he was experiencing and how hard things were for him. And there was no consideration of what's been hard for me and how his behavior was contributing to how that is being made hard for me. And that pissed me off because I was like, you are making my life harder and you're adding to my burnout and my stress, and I'm having a harder time coping. And then you're complaining about me not wanting to do things the way that you want. Like, he had a thing where he's like, you should get up earlier in the morning so we can have coffee together, because he'd leave and he'd be at work by like 7:30 or 8 sometimes. And I'm like, no, I usually get up and I start my day. I get up around 8 and I start my day and I'll be writing articles in bed. So I'd be getting up usually before he's even out the door. But he was just assuming that I'm just sitting in bed all day and had this bone to pick with me not getting up at the same time as him. And it was like this whole thing where you could tell it really bothered him, where he was like, the implication that I felt was like that I'm lazy because I'm not getting up at the same time. And he kept saying, oh, you should get up earlier and stuff. And it's like, no, like, I stay up later than you. I work later than you do. I'm doing more things than you are. And my work is more labor intensive throughout the day with like doing the horse chores and stuff. And I'm fucking burnt out and have been for years. And this move added to that. And I am resting. And also, it's none of your fucking business. I don't tell you when to go to work. But he was like, oh, well, we could like have coffee and spend more time together. And I was like, well, we could also spend more time together if you'd actually cook or do the fucking dishes once in a while. And it's not just me doing those things and me doing all the grocery shopping. And I was like, I feel like a little housewife. And again, for people who sign up for that, and if that's your agreement in your relationship, that is fine. But I'm an entrepreneur. I have a whole business to run. I have animals to take care of. I don't mind cooking and cleaning and doing my part, but I do not want to be the only person in the house doing that unless I am literally the only person in the house, period. So it was pissing me off, and I kept saying such. And then I was just hitting the point where it's like, in my gut, I knew this wasn't going to work out. And I was like, well, fuck, we just moved here. And he just helped me with the whole move. And I was like, I start feeling this way in like mid to end of September. And honestly, in the summer before that, I had an inkling, but I wanted to believe him that it was just the stress of the move, that there was going to be a shift back to the way that he treated me at the very beginning, which naturally did not happen. So then October, I go to my friend's wedding. I'm away at her wedding, and I was talking to people about this. And also, like, at this wedding, as I've said, like, they're meant to be together, these two. They're high school sweethearts. They've basically been married for over a decade, and like, everyone knew they were going to get married, and this was just like finally making it official. And like, they have the type of relationship where it's like, he loves and respects her, isn't tired of her, always excited to see her. Like, this is actually rewinding for a bit. When I got back from the bachelorette party, we'd been gone for just a weekend. And when he saw her, he was so excited to see her. He said that he missed her. And then I thought about like the ball and chain comments that my partner had been making. And I was just like, wow, what a contrast. And then the wedding was even more so that, like, seeing the love they had for each other and like how open they are to sharing that love with everyone, and how obvious that love is, and just how much respect there is for one another. It was just really clear to me that like, that's what I want in my relational dynamic. I don't want to ever have my partner making me feel like a burden on a regular basis. And I don't want to have a partner who, when I express that I'm feeling that way, views it as like annoying and doesn't handle it with anything other than like, I'm sorry I've made you feel that way, and like caring about how they make me feel, which is like, honestly, now that I say that out loud, it's the fucking bare minimum. But I concede. We're going to get to why this is such a good lesson, I promise. So if you're listening to this going, wow, this stupid bitch, I know, okay? I know. But yeah, at the wedding, there is like a lot of other couples too who are in good relationships, and I was talking to, and they were asking me how I'm doing. So I told them that stuff, and I told them the thing about like him wanting me to get up at the same time with him and like not doing anything around the house. Because at this point, it's been over a month that we've lived together. I've done all the grocery shopping. I've done all the cleaning. I've done all the cooking. He's not filled or emptied the dishwasher once. and he has been using dishes. He's not cooked once. The one thing I'll say about the cooking is that he didn't have the expectation of me cooking for him. He literally just wouldn't eat. It was like really unhealthy eating habits where he'd go all day without eating and he'd just eat like a bowl of ramen or like a bag of chips at the end of the day. It was so bad. So, like, obviously, if I'm cooking for myself and he's there in the house, like, I'm not an asshole. I'm gonna cook. But then it's like, you should be doing the fucking dishes. Or at the very least, if you want to hang out with me more while I'm cooking, instead of sitting on the couch and playing on your phone, you could sit in the kitchen with me. You could talk to me and ask me about my day and keep me company instead of having it be separate where it's like, you don't even want to hang out with me. But alas. So he also hadn't vacuumed, he hadn't cleaned any of the bathrooms or done like anything at this point. So I'm talking about how frustrated I am, and they're like, yeah, that's ridiculous. You need to get out of this relationship, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, yes, like I'm feeling that way too. Like I just feel bad because of like him helping with the move and like how like I know he's moved a bunch of times and like I feel bad about all these things and I just want to be considerate. And they're like, honestly, like that's not your problem. Like, yeah, that sucked for him, but like ultimately he's a grown man who chose to move in with you. And I'm like, you know what? You're right. And like one important thing with this move is that like I preemptively put only my name on the lease because I just had a feeling and I didn't want to be put in a situation where he could try to fight me on moving out when it's like all my horses are here and I have my business here. So I was kind of like, I could just be like, okay. So then I'm thinking some more. And then like, I also know that his sister's supposed to be coming out to visit like pretty much right when I'm back from this wedding. So that I'm like, okay, like I don't really want to do this while his sister's visiting because like all of her tickets are booked. So like even before she came, I get back from the wedding though, and I tell him like how I've been feeling, that I just really haven't been feeling good about things, and that I feel like our relationship has taken a huge shift and I don't like it and I don't want it to continue. And then the cleaning stuff around the house and stuff, and it's kind of the same response where it's like, oh, stress of the move. And then there was like a comment made, I can't remember if it was at this point or just before this, before the wedding, where he was just like, well, I helped a lot with the move, so I figured for like the first month you could do the dishes and stuff. And I was like, well, it's not transactional. Like I appreciate the help with the move, but that doesn't mean that it's my job to take on the toll of doing all the work around the house along with working my job and doing everything just so you can rest. Like that's not really fair to me. And these are just things that you're supposed to do when you live together. So I was like irked by that. Oh, and ladies, or like anyone, horse people. One thing I forgot to say is that before the wedding, he told me where he came back from work and he went out of his way to say this. He said, he's like, yeah, I got into a discussion with my friends at work and I told them, I was like, oh yeah, like when I tell her this, it's gonna make her mad, her being me. And he's like, yeah, like I said that I'm never going to pick up horse shit ever, that I'll do other things, but I'll never pick up horse shit ever. And I was like, are you fucking kidding me? And he was like, no, like it's peasant work. I'd never want to do that. I'll do other things. And I'm like, you said that you wanted to live on a farm with me. And I was like, in what world does that future make any fucking sense if you are never intending? And he was emphasizing the never intending on ever even picking up a pile of horse shit. So I was like, if I got home from work and I was like really stressed out and I'd had a bad day and someone I had helping me with picking up poop bailed on me and I needed your help, you wouldn't help me. And then he's like, well, like I could help you stuff the hay or something instead. And I was like, so you wouldn't help me with picking their paddock even once if I needed it. And then he's like, well, no, and like I don't want it to become like my regular job. And I was like, okay, but like that's different. I'm not asking for it to be your regular job. And also the other thing is like at this point I'd never even asked him to help me pick up horse poop ever. So he brought this up himself where he just went out of his way to say this. And then I was like, what if I like injured myself or something and I needed help? He's like, well, that's like what employees are for. And I was like, what if it snows and they can't get to work? What if they're sick? What if there's something that comes up that means that the only person that would be doing the work would be me and I would be doing it myself and you wouldn't be there to help me? And then he kept making excuses and I was like, what if I'm literally just riding and you're watching me ride and the horse poops in the arena? You wouldn't even pick it up then. He's like, oh, well, like I guess then, but like it's peasant work. I don't want to do it. And I was like, that's fucking ridiculous. I was like, I don't want to live on a farm with someone who's not going to do animal care at any point. So I was like, picking poop for horses and like animals is like one of the things that you have to do repeatedly. It's one of the most repeated tasks if you're choosing to have animals. And I was like, I get that the horses are mine. I would never make it your regular job. If I needed someone to help regularly, I would plan to hire someone, but it's like, I would still want you to help me when I need it because you're my partner and you should want to alleviate the level of work that I have to do because you care about me. And yeah, so he more or less maintained his position. He backpedaled a little bit on some things, but after that I was pissed off. So this is something that did come up at the wedding that I told to people too. And then like obviously all the horse people that I told were like, that's fucking ridiculous. And then the other thing I brought up to him too at this point was cat litter, where I was like, like I don't even know if I ever want to have kids, but if I got pregnant, like I'm not supposed to do cat litter, so you would have to do the cat litter. And he didn't say no to doing that, but his response was also really weird, where it's like, if you fucking put a baby into someone and they're using their body to incubate a baby and it's taking a wear and tear toll on their body, and you're not going to do the fucking cat litter along with everything else when they're the ones that are having to inconvenience themselves the most, that is absurd. And I didn't like his answer. So like, honestly, that was a big turning point in how I felt about him, where it was like, for me, if I'm with a partner, even if there's tasks that I really wouldn't want to do myself, if they needed help with something and I knew it would make their day substantially easier and it's not putting me out very much and it's not something that I physically cannot do or something that like terrifies me. Like it'd be different if the person had like a phobia of horses or they had some like psychological reason why it would be way more difficult for them. Totally different. It's not for one of those reasons, but it's like, I would just help my partner with stuff because that's what you do with a partner. So anyways, that was a big shift. I brought up all that stuff like right the day I got back from the weddings. I couldn't keep it in. And I was like, I haven't been feeling good about things. And like, we're going to need to talk about this more. I know your sister's coming out, but I just wanted to let you know where my head is at before she's out here because I'm not feeling good about this relationship and I'm really having doubts. And then his sister came out. His sister's amazing. She's awesome. She's lovely. Really liked her. Talked to her about a bunch of stuff too, where she was just like asking how much she's doing around the house. And I was honest, and it wasn't very much. And I got the impression from her that it was like a track record type thing where he was like that a lot, and she came through and like helped with a bunch of stuff that he wasn't doing while she was there. So she just picked up the slack, but at that point he still wasn't doing things. And then like she left, and then like there was like a few days after she left where I was just kind of planning like my conversation, like talking to my therapist about what my plans were for like how I was going to go through with this and talk to him about it. And like at some time in October, he did the dishes where he emptied the dishwasher. Or no, he didn't empty the dishwasher. He hand washed the dishes in the sink, but he never at any point of living with me successfully emptied and loaded the dishwasher, or like at least cleared out the sink and cleaned the dishes in the sink. So he never successfully did both. He also never vacuumed. He never sweeped. He never cleans the bathroom at all. So this is important, and you'll find out why. So then like October rolls around, like we're in October, his sister's left, and then I pick a day where I like sit down and I talk to him about this, and I just basically tell him like, look, like I've been having a really hard time. I'm really burnt out. I'm stressed with work. I'm feeling really overwhelmed, and I do not feel good about our relationship. I've been telling you these things since the end of July, where I've noticed like a shift in how you've been treating me. I haven't seen a change. I don't feel good about it. And I was like, it doesn't matter how you perceive this situation or whether or not you think that it's fine. I was like, I don't feel good about this. So whether or not you think it's just because of the stress of the move or whatever, I don't feel good about this. And I was like, also, in my opinion, like, I don't think the move is a good enough excuse for this to continue this long, because you have been adding stress to my life because of how this has been dealt with and how it's been making me feel. And I don't think a move is a big enough stressor to justify that, because moves happen. And like, if anything, like a relationship really doesn't have that much value to me if during times of stress is when I feel the most abandoned and detached from the person, like on a repeated basis. And we're not even talking huge stressors. We're talking regular life stressors, right? And then I was like, I don't feel good about this. Like, I can't continue this in good faith because I'm having way too many doubts and it's not fair to me. It's not fair to you. And this is what needs to happen. And then I was like, I'm sorry because I know that you helped a lot with the move and I know that this isn't ideal, but like, this is where I'm at. I don't feel good about things. And then this is what I need to have happen. And he handled that part of it so well and was like so nice about it. I was like, I understand. You just need to do what makes you happy. Like, I really care about you and I just want you to like, take care of yourself and do what you need to do. And like, this sucks, but like, I get it. And then I was like, wow, that went so much better than I thought it would. And it was good for a little bit. And then the election, like the US election rolled around, and then he just started to be not very nice about Trump and like winning, and was like the day of the election, he's like, today's the day that some people might lose their rights, because he was starting to mock like my political views and things that he'd clearly kept more on the downplay. And then like as soon as like I dumped him, it came out more. And then I was like, I really don't understand this. He started calling me like a radical left extremist. And I was like, I don't really think it's extreme to say that like everyone deserves housing, women should have bodily autonomy, that people should be able to marry who they want to marry consensually, and that people shouldn't be persecuted for their gender identity. Like, these are all things that don't harm anyone else and are just about people having choices and freedom. So I was like, if that's extreme, then like whatever. Like, the alternative, like the other side of the coin would be right-wing extremists, which is like women don't deserve to have rights and that we hate people who aren't cisgendered white people, basically. So I was like, I'm content with that. But he was going off about it and kind of like mocking my views and like saying that we broke up because I'm closed-minded and can't be like open-minded to different perspectives. Because one of the things that I told him too is that I just wasn't comfortable with like how unempathetic he was about certain things, like even just like my feelings, where it's like writing it off as the move, not taking that into account. And then he'd started to say things that were like really just like inconsiderate of people that I would point out, and I was like, I really don't like that. And like initially, like I thought it was like an ignorance type thing where he didn't know, and like I'd corrected him on these things early on in the relationship, and then he'd like been like, oh yeah, like I'm sorry, like I see where you're coming from, you're right, and it had stopped, but then it had started coming back. So it was like something that had shifted to like please me, but not because he actually felt like it was the right thing to do. So he's saying that I was being closed-minded for not being able to accept those things. And I was like, it's not closed-minded. I was like, these are ethical differences that you're clearly not willing to like work on or answer to. So it's like, it's not me being closed-minded. It's me setting a standard for like the people who are allowed to have access to me based off of their ethics and morals. And I was like, I can't deal with being around someone who's that morally different than me in a romantic capacity. I was like, it's something where it's like I could be civil with someone in a business setting, even as an acquaintance, someone that I hold like at far, where it's like I know that overall they're a well-intentioned person, but there's things in their belief systems that I don't agree with. And like one of the things with him was that he would intermittently try to play devil's advocate for like spanking kids. And it got really bad like over the summer in the midst of the move. And that's when I was like, this is not going to work out long term, I don't think. And like, and it was just like this whole thing where it's like at that time during the stressor, I'd kind of like argued with him in the moments, but then pushed it aside. And like, it was something that pissed me off because he was like arguing with me, my mom, and my brother's girlfriend, who's an early childhood educator, and my mom's a teacher. So it was like three people who are well versed in behavioral science. Meanwhile, he has no education on the topic. And he was just like, well, in my personal experience, like I have friends whose parents hit them and they turned out fine. And I was like, they turned out fine despite being hit, not because of it. Those are two completely different things. I was like, you can't use that as an argument against like decades of studies. And then I started to get the impression where it's like he literally doesn't understand how studies work. And I was like, this is such a turn for me. So anyways, there's just like these educational differences that really started to get exposed that I was like, this is fucked. And then apparently I was closed-minded for having an issue with that. And he started to be really mean during the election, was making these comments that were just like nasty and like poking fun. And then when Trump won, I was like, I want to kill myself. I was like, this fucking sucks, because I was still in a house with him, because I was like, I'm not going to be an asshole and just say he has to leave immediately. I'm going to give him time to pack. And then also it's like, I need December rent to be paid for. So we had to live together until January 1st. And for like the first 2.5 weeks of November, because I think that like it was a thing where it was like he responded really well to the breakup initially. And then when he actually started to feel hurt and realized that I was serious, then that's where this animosity and anger and resentment started to come out. So then he was like not very nice for like 2.5 weeks. And then like we have some mutual friends that I'd met through him, and I was talking to them about it because they checked in on me, and I was like, look, like this is what's happening. And I was like, it makes me really uncomfortable because there's been 2 different days now where I've not said anything to him and where I've been minding my own business, and he's gone out of his way to antagonize me and try to make me feel bad about like my belief systems and then the election results. And then I think they talked to him, and then he apologized to me and said that he was sorry, that he was being a dick, and that he'd reacted poorly, and that that's not what he wants to do. And then after that, everything was actually pretty civil and fine, and he'd been like dealing with it better. And these attacks of animosity had stopped, which is good. So honestly, like all of December was pretty chill. Like I'd say there was like 3 blow-ups I think in November, 2 of which correlated with like the election, and then the last one was at like the very end of the month before I was going away for a couple days. And that was like the last one, and that happened like in front of my mom and like another person. So it kind of was validating for me because they saw what was going on. They saw the dynamic and they were like, holy shit. And then like after that, it was chill, and like we were able to remain civil until he moved out on January 1st. But the key points are that like no cleaning happened. He did the dishes a few times, and like after November, I think in December he's just started washing his own dishes, which I was fine with because it's like you don't have to do my dishes. And honestly, like at this point when I made extra food, I was still offering it up to him. See, I knew he wasn't eating enough, and I'm not an asshole. But like, even still, there was like no cleaning. And in my mind, because he said that he thought that I was like the one, and that like he wanted to make this work long term and and made it clear that like he didn't want the relationship to end. And in my mind, if that's actually how you felt, you would start cleaning and doing some of the stuff like that to show that you're capable of doing it. Like even if it wouldn't win me back, which it wouldn't have. It's like you would do that even if you're not sure that it's going to pan out. You do it because 1, it's the right thing, and 2, because if there's a chance that it could fix the relationship, you would. And that didn't happen. So anyways, December and November were weird months. I did get my book submitted. So like also during all this, it's like I was having to finish a book, which is also why all of this was pissing me off, because it's like, I have a deadline. That I have a whole ass book that I need to submit for a deadline. And you're not being considerate of that. It's like, you don't have a deadline. You have your regular job. Like you could be doing stuff around the house to alleviate my stress, and you're not. And then you're complaining about how my stress is impacting you instead of looking at how you're impacting me and my stress, while I do everything to keep the house somewhat in order. So that was really frustrating. So yeah, December and November were kind of weird months. December, I got to go on another road trip, and I went like in the winter time, which is different because I hadn't really done any winter road trips up into the mountains of BC, where it's like you're going to more mountainous areas. So that was awesome because I got to see my friend Amy again, and that was really fun. We went to a hot spring, and it was just really, really beautiful, and it's a way different vibe in the winter versus the summer. So I loved that. That was fantastic. Initially following my breakup, like one of my other friends who was also breaking up with a emotionally abusive partner at that time was supposed to be moving in with me. She's supposed to let me know by December 1st if she couldn't, which she did not. And we were still talking about her moving in, and we had plans where it was like for the first month she was going to do horse chores to help work off the rent while she nailed down like a regular job. So she was just going to offset the amount of work that I had and like pay off the rent that way, which I was okay with. And that was the plan. She ended up not breaking up with her boyfriend. She got back together with him, which a little bit triggering for me because like I've done that a bunch of times with like exes and stuff in the past. And like this last situation was actually one that I was proud of, where like I know that I still stayed too long and that I should have looked at earlier red flags instead of like wanting to believe what the person was telling me. I should have gone with my gut instead of going with what they told me. I mean, like it's just the stress of the move, because in my gut, I didn't feel like it was that. However, I cut things off way earlier than I have in the past. I cut things off at the mark of around 6 months, and I was like, enough is enough. And it was in a situation where it was like harder to do because we were living together, and I felt bad about having to have him find somewhere else to live and stuff. So there was guilt surrounding that, but I still made the choice to do it, even though it was really uncomfortable, and it would have been like easier in some aspects just to keep pushing through, but harder because it's like, I know I wouldn't have been happy. So I made a choice. That's one that I don't think I would have made as early in the past. I would have waited for it to get a lot worse. And I didn't. So I'm proud because I think that's a sign that I learned from previous lessons where I've waited longer when I felt a similar way. Sorry, that's my cat again. Where I felt a similar way and then I waited longer and it didn't get better. It just got worse. Then things ended on a worse note where everyone's more mad at each other. There's a lot more animosity and you've wasted way more of your time with that person. So this is a valuable lesson in me, like asserting a boundary, standing my ground and holding it firm, because I would have had the opportunity if I'd backed out of this breakup where this person would have gotten back together with me almost for certain, and where I could have continued down that. And then I would have been in a situation where it would have been like spring, summer, or God forbid, like even next year or the following, where it's like, I'm finally making the call. And it's like, now I wasted a whole nother year of that. And it was even harder because it's like by leaving this relationship, I'm making my own life more difficult by having potentially more financial burdens by having to pay that portion of the rent that I was supposed to be splitting with them, right? But anyways, I had this friend who was supposed to be moving in with me. So December kind of continues on like without a hitch, where it's like pretty chill. I'm just doing like regular work stuff. It's pretty boring. The horses are settling in. I'm just doing regular chores. I did hire some help for some of the horse chores in November. So I was getting help like 3 to 4 days a week with the horse chores, which alleviated a lot of the burden for me because I was getting super burnt out when I was having to do all of their daily chores and all my work and also trying to get my book submitted. So that was really stressful for me. So that was being done. So I'm just heading into the holidays. It's like obviously awkward still living with an ex, but like I don't see him very much. And then at this point he's being civil. So when I do have to deal with him, it wasn't like a big deal. Christmas rolls around, my grandma comes out to visit, hanging out with my family, doing regular Christmas things. Really, really nice. And then December 26th, which is the day after Christmas, it's called Boxing Day here in Canada. And my roommate, who I had talked to like 2 days prior about when they want to move in on January 1st, which is now like 6 days away, and we talked about that plan. She then bails on me last minute and is like, hey, like, I'm so sorry. Like, I'm just really stressed and like the cost, blah, blah, blah. And like, I know that this is like last minute and la, 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 la. So I was really not happy with that. I was like, that's really kind of putting a burden on me. And like we'd had multiple discussions leading up to this day where like I brought it up. And in my opinion, like for someone who has anxiety with communicating, when like I bring up, hey, when do you want to move in your stuff? Even if it's after December 1st, like that's still opening a window for you to tell me these things and at least give me a little bit more notice. But that's not what happened. And like they just continued on with like the charade of pretending they're moving in, even though at that point there would have been at least some level of knowledge of what they were already feeling. It's not like they just snapped their fingers and felt that way just on December 26th. So anyways, like I tell them how it made me feel and like how it's going to kind of impact me financially and like my frustration with the lack of communication and the poor communication. And like I'm met with apologies, but there's also a couple of comments made about like, oh, like I didn't remember that you'd said the December 1st thing. And then I said, go look through your text, like it's in writing. And I also brought it up to you in person. And I found that frustrating because it's like, even if you forgot, like I have ADHD and like so does this friend. So it's like, I get that you forget things, but when it's like an important thing like that, that's key to your, like, that's personally for me, not something that I would forget, especially for that long, especially when there's repeated reminders. So I don't fully believe that it actually was forgotten about. I feel like that was more of an excuse. And if it was forgotten about, then you weren't prioritizing it enough and realizing how important it was to me to have that be taken into account and have that be considered. So then, yeah, there was the agreement that like she would still help me out with horse chores and do stuff to like cover off like at least the first month so that I wasn't left in the lurch, and I was okay with that. So then we make plans for that. And there was one day where she came to help me just like organize stuff in the house for like about an hour. And then there was another day where she was supposed to be coming to do the horse chores and that she said she would come do them. And I messaged her the morning of that day and I was like, hey, like when are you coming? I just need to know like if I need to top up their hay before I go to my clients. And I don't hear back. I don't hear back. And then I finally hear back at like 11 a.m. And then she's like, I'm going to be coming at noon. And I was like, okay, their hay looks okay until then. So I'll leave their hay. And then I'm heading to my client at noon after doing like morning stuff, which is like my emails, packing packages, tidying up the house, feeding my animals, and just doing like general house chores. And she texts me and she's like, hey, I'm on my way now, but I don't know if I'm going to be able to finish the chores. And then like at this point, I'm pretty upset because I'm like, you bailed on me like very, very last minute, like almost as last minute as you could possibly get for the rent, which is like a pretty huge way to bail. Because also, like, for anyone coming in, even if I was trying to find a roommate for February, like, if they live anywhere else, most living places require that you give at least 30 days notice, which means in order to find someone for February, I would have to find a roommate that will commit to moving in and sign on here and give notice on January 1st. Which within 5 days of like, since I was told on the 26th, it gives me 5 days to advertise and find someone, which isn't realistic because it's also like my animals are in my house. Everyone who would live here would have full access to my animals. They'd have access to a lot of my business stuff. And it's just a huge invasion of privacy. So obviously I would want to interview people and make sure it's a good fit and do all that. So like I had at this point just been like, okay, February is also a write-off. And I like had told my supposed to be roommate as much as that. So anyways, she says that she's not sure she's going to be able to do like the full amount. So I send her a voice note and I'm like, okay, look, like I'm heading to my clients right now and they're like in Maple Ridge, which is like another city that's about half an hour to 40 minutes away, depending on where you're going and what time of the day. And I was like, I'm not going to be back until like 4:30 p.m. and it's going to be dark then. So it's like, I'm pretty frustrated because if you told me this in the morning, it would have given me the opportunity to do the chores in the morning and not have to come back and do them in the daytime. And I was like, I'm also frustrated because I feel like this is one of the first days where you've had to like work off the like do work towards like what you the obligations that you had agreed to. And like you're already bailing and you're doing it really last minute, like halfway through the day. And it's leaving me in like a place where I don't have a lot of options for solving it that aren't going to deliberately stress me out. And I'm already stressed enough. And then I like made a point of saying like how much more money it was going to be costing me each month. And then also the thing about the chores and stuff, if it wasn't going to be reliable. And then I also reminded her that I was like, hey, like I did double check 2 days ago that you could come today and you confirmed it. And I was like, you can scroll back and look, like it's right there in writing. And then it was the same thing where it's like, oh, like I forgot that I had done that. And then she brought up saying like, I don't want there to be this weird power dynamic. And like, I feel uncomfortable that I'm going to feel like forever indebted to you. And I was like, look, that's not fair to me, man. Like the only power dynamic is me holding you to your word. And the only reason you feel in any way indebted is because of your own decisions with what you agreed to. And I was like, I didn't make you sign a contract because I trusted you and your word as my friend. And yeah, like there is no debt other than like what you agreed to with your word. And now you're lapsing on that verbal agreement. And that is the only obligation that is there where it's like you agreed to these things. I'm holding you to your word and I'm telling you how breaking that word is impacting me and the inconveniences that it's placing on me and how it's making me uncomfortable. And I was like, if the guilt of hearing that makes you feel bad, then the lesson learned here is that you shouldn't be overcommitting and that you need to communicate better. Because I was like, for me, I feel like the only way I could have avoided this situation is by not taking you at your word. And personally, for me, with my friends, I don't want to be in a situation where I have to do that. Like, I should be able to believe their word. I should be able to trust their communication, that they're going to communicate their needs with me. And that I don't have to fish it out of them so hard where it's like, I have made these attempts to reach out and check in and do these things. And it's like, in theory, I shouldn't even need to do that because if something changes with them, it's their job as my friend to tell me if something in their situation has changed instead of for me to have to fish it out. So I was pretty upset by that. And then I still was like, look, I understand where you're coming from. And like, I understand that you're having a hard time and like that mental health stuff is a struggle and like da 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 da. But I was like, I still need you to communicate with me. Even if I can understand where you're coming from, it doesn't change the impact that it has on me as a person. And there just needs to be better communication. So then that was that. She ended up finishing the chores, which was great. Talked to her on the phone that night, and I was like being really supportive, and I was like, I get where you're coming from, and I've been like in a similar case with like relationships where I like keep going back and they're like impacting my mental health and emotional health, and I don't want to get up and I'm sleeping in really late and I just have no energy to do anything. And I was like, it's not a healthy place, and like I support you as a friend and blah blah blah. But needless to say, the next day, which was New Year's Eve, I was having a New Year's Eve get together with friends, and then she ended up bailing last minute on that again. And then I was upset because I was like, okay, look, dude, like I bought food in accordance with the people who are coming. Like, you bailed on me or tried to bail on me yesterday, and then you bailed on the moving in on December 26th, like 5 days before you were supposed to. And you've been really flaky. Like, the bailing on the move too was also done over text message, which I thought was pretty shitty, where it's like you could have at least called me, or better yet, met in person so that we could have had a discussion. Like, you've disabled the chance for actual proper discussion in a lot of ways because of how you've handled this in like a very avoidant manner. So I was like, I would have preferred that you had been more direct and that you'd let me know sooner about this. And also just like, given the circumstances of how flaky you've been over the last little while, like it really does bother me. So I was like, I really hope that you're not bailing on this party to go hang out with insert name of the emotionally abusive boyfriend here. And then that pissed her off, and she went off on me. It was like, it's none of your business, and da da da. Which the reaction to me is the type of reaction that you'd get when you're like caught in the act of doing something, and it's like a very visceral, emotional reaction. So I think that she was, in fact, spending New Year's with him, which she's right. Technically, it's not my business, but there was a discussion that we had about like her bailing on moving in with me, where I said, like, look, and this is like, at this point I said this, they had been broken up. I was like, look, if you bail on me to go live with him, like I'm going to be really pissed off, because I do feel like I've been a more reliable person in your life, that I've been more consistent and considerate of your emotions, and that I've been like a better friend to you than he has. And I think that I'm deserving of like communication and like not having it be like that. So I was like, I'll be really upset if that's why you bail on moving in. And she's like, no, I'd never do that to you. I totally understand and I agree with you, blah, blah, blah. But I think that's exactly what happened. So I said that much. And then basically I was accused of like using her, and then she said she was going to invoice me for like all of the work that she had done, and that would pay off the rent, and that since I always need advance notice, that she's going to give it to me and tell me now that she's not going to do any of the chores or help me at all with anything. And basically implied that like our friendship to me was just like a transactional thing where I was using her. And that really bothered me, because like she was going to beauty school and she'd done my nails a bunch, and like I always offered to pay for the nails, and I paid for some of those sessions, but for overwhelmingly so she'd be like, no, I'm just practicing, we're just hanging out, this is just for fun, and like I need the practice, so like it's totally fine, it's on me, you don't need to pay me. And I thought that was fine, because I'd trailered the horses to a bunch of places and she'd gone riding with me and stuff. And like, so I didn't think it was like a transactional relationship, but I thought it was kind of like a you scratch my back, I scratch yours type deal, where it's like we're both doing things for each other, where it's like technically costing us money, or we're doing a service, but it's so that we can spend time together. Because also, like when I'd driven to the Kootenays, which are in like northern BC at the beginning of December, she'd come with and I'd paid for all the gas, and it was about $250 in gas. But like, again, no big deal. I was like, whatever, like I wanted you to come, whatever. So like I was pissed off about the transactional comment, and it was really triggering to me. So I was just like, look, dude, like we don't need to be friends anymore. And then that was that. So that was how my year ended, was by losing a friend. And it makes me sad, because like obviously like I care about all my friends. I don't want any of my friends, or like any person for that matter, to be in a shitty relationship that's not serving them and that's making them unhappy. And I don't want that for her either. So like I hope she gets out of that situation, because I do care about her well-being, and I think that that situation is impactful to her well-being, whether I'm in her life or not. Like I think that she deserves better. She deserves someone that treats her better. And I hope she finds it. And if this is the path she needs to take to learn that lesson, then so be it. But I was pretty offended, because it's like, I do think I'm a good friend. I take good care of my friends. I care about their well-being. I'm always there for them. If they ever had anything going on that they needed help with, like I will be there. I would bail them out of jail. I'd do whatever, like I'm a ride or die type of friend, even if I don't talk to them on the phone a ton or stay in constant contact and stuff. Because I do, with my ADHD, it is hard being like immediately involved in someone's life unless I'm seeing them on a regular basis in person. And I'm not really a phone call type person. So I'll text them, like I send a lot of memes, and that's kind of how I communicate with friends. But I care about them. And like what I don't like being accused of is that like I'm taking advantage of them. And like that's something I'd talked about in the past, where it's like I've been taken advantage of by people, like especially horse friends, where they'll come and they'll have me trailer them and I'll do things for them and I'll give them like a bunch of free product and stuff and do stuff like that, where it's like costing me a lot of money and I'm putting a lot of emotional, physical, and financial labor into the friendship just because I want to be generous because I love my friends. And then it ended up being taken advantage of in another situation with a friend. And this friend knew about that. And it was the same thing where it's like I always check to make sure that they feel like it's a fair trade and like that everything's fair and that they're feeling good about things. And I check in on them lots and be like, yes, yes, yes. And then when it hit a point where I needed to end the friendship for whatever reason, then all of that stuff is like being thrown back in my face transactionally. And honestly, it wasn't even unlike with my relationship, which again, this person knew about, where I was like accused at the end of that relationship of using him for help with the move, when it was like, no, I told you again and again how hard this was going to be and checked to make sure that you were okay with it. And you chose to continue to stay involved. And then now you're retroactively throwing that back on me and making it clear that this actually was transactional to you, where you're only doing those things in hopeful return for like a long-term relationship and long-term access to me as a friend, regardless of whether or not I feel the relationship's being fair to me. And I don't really like that. I don't think that those things should be transactional. Like I didn't take her on rides with me or like or go on that road trip and stuff with the intent of having anything come out of it. It was just so that we could spend time together. And that wasn't transactional to me. And like I wouldn't have thrown it back at her. And like I think it was a situation where I was being lashed out at because of the frustration of like maybe guilt. Cause like I know in that situation, if I'd put something off for that long, like I would feel guilty about it because I'd know that it was negatively impacting the person. But I think at this point in my life, I would handle the guilt differently. I don't know if I would have handled it differently if I was a lot younger. But like if I make a mistake where it's like I avoid dealing with something and I cause someone else more problems because of avoiding dealing with that, and it's someone really close to me who I care about, that's a situation where ultimately it is on me to deal with that and to deal with the discomfort of the situation that I've caused. And that's kind of like how I would view it. My cats have been very annoying this podcast episode, especially Scout. For once, it's actually not Queso, because I got him a 7-foot cat tree and he's just like chilling at the very top of it and just like playing around and jumping up and down and stuff. But Scout is just like the one that keeps walking past my microphone. So yeah, no, that was my year. And like the lessons I've learned from like people this year, I'd say the main one is that like I really need to just listen to my intuition and listen to like how I feel about things and not just take people at their word. Ultimately, like I want to cultivate the type of relationships where I can take people at their word, but I've clearly not been good at doing that over the years. And how adaptable and how forgiving and how open I have been to taking people at their word has come back to bite me a lot of times. So what I'm going to do for this year, or what my intention is going to be for this year, and what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to try to go with my gut and go with my intuition. And even if someone is telling me exactly what I want to hear, if I don't feel good about it, I'm going to try to have a happy medium of trusting them at their actions, not their word, at their actions. Do their actions make them feel like a trustworthy person to me? Are they flaky to other people in their life? What are they consistently showing me? And is it in line with what they're telling me? And I'm going to go with that. And ultimately, what I'm going to try to do is, if despite that, my gut still doesn't feel right about something and something feels off, I'm going to run with that, because ultimately it's like I will attract the right type of people, or that person will come back into my life. And that's something that I do fully believe, where it's like what meant to be will be. And if I choose to like not have people in my life, or if I feel uncomfortable with something and I need to take space because of that, if it's meant to be, it will be, and something will happen that will either end up making me feel more comfortable with that person, or there'll be a new person who's meant to be in my life that will be there. And that's kind of what I'm going to run with this year, because most of my problems that I've run into in relationships have been where I've intuitively felt in my gut that something was off a lot earlier before I end up making a decision. And like one silver lining is that I've made that decision earlier this last year than I have in the past, because in the past there's been relationships where I've been mistreated to a far worse degree and where I've forgiven them and again for like years, and it's never turned out well for me. If I want to take them at their word and believe that they're actually sorry, and like believe it when they are trying to do damage control when I'm like out the door, instead of like looking at it from the perspective that it's like someone who actually wants me in their life and values me as a person isn't going to put themselves in a position where I am out the door and only react and seem apologetic in that setting. They're going to not let it get to that point in the first place. And that's kind of the mindset that I'm going to maintain. And I'm going to just try to go with my intuition more, because it's like all of my really long-term friends and people who've stuck around, like I've intuitively felt that I could trust, and I have been able to trust their word, because if they're not sure that they can commit to something, the way that they tell it to me is they'll be like, I want to, but I'm not sure yet. Like they won't commit to things that they're not sure that they can do, especially if it's in a situation where it's going to impact me in a big way if it falls through. Or if they can't commit by like the day that I say, then they'll tell me that. So like the people who've stuck around in my life have been more reliable, and like intuitively I haven't had to feel not at trust with them because they've been more consistent. So I'm going to try to run with my intuition more. And I've had a hard time with intuition because like I'm such an anxious person that I'll have like anxieties about things, and I'll confuse anxiety with intuition. So then when I start to have an intuitive hit, I worry that it's just an anxiety that's being unreasonable. But like I'm starting to learn the difference between the two, I think, where it's like an intuitive hit feels very, very different than an anxiety. And I'm going to just try to be more conscious of that and take note about how I'm feeling internally and emotionally on any given basis, and just try to be more in tune with that aspect of it. Because like I would say that's where things have been the most difficult for me, is like with people, it's like I want to keep forgiving and trusting and trusting and trusting and believe what I want to see rather than what's like right in front of me. So I'm gonna just like go with, like, my grandma told me something before she left. She's like, people will show you who they are, and when they do, believe them. And I think that's what I'm going to go with, because it's like someone can want to be someone different, but if that's not what their actions are supporting, then they're not that person right now. So like the people that I've discussed in this situation, it's not even like, I don't think either of them are bad people. They're just not people for me right now where I am in life, because I'm looking for something different. I'd rather have a really small group of really ride or die people that I can count on and that can count on me than have a larger group of people where there's not that same consistency. And that's ultimately what I'm after in the long run, and that's what I'm going to try to cultivate in the new year. And like if I lose connections, I kind of just trust that it's like I'm going to make new ones, and it's going to kind of be a situation where they bounce back. So for this year, like my goals are to trust my intuition more, to go on more adventures even if they're by myself, to hike more. I have a goal where I want to hike 1,000 kilometers in this year, and I'm already at like almost 90 kilometers just in the first 2 weeks of January, which is pretty awesome. I also have a goal where it's like I want to do more stuff with my horses. I want to spend more time outside. I want to do more meaningful things. I want to reduce my screen time, and I want to just spend more time living, and I want to make more connections with people. I want to practice rejection therapy, where I'm just doing things that traditionally I would probably go like, oh, I'm worried about embarrassing myself, but it's like, who cares? What's more cringy than being cringy is being the type of person that's like sitting there judging someone who's harmlessly just being themselves and having fun. Like, I don't want to be that person. I think that is more of an embarrassing trait than doing something that someone might perceive as embarrassing if you're having fun and if it's utterly harmless. So I want to go and have more fun and do my thing and just enjoy life without worrying about being cringy and being perceived a certain way, because I don't want that to like run my life. There's a lot of things that I've missed out on doing that I would have had fun doing because I've been worried about being embarrassed. So I'm going to try practicing rejection therapy by like saying saying things that I want to say, dancing when it feels right, doing things that I want to do, being okay with being bad at things. And like ultimately it's like I'll attract the right people. If someone thinks I'm cringy and embarrassing, they're not my person. So that's what I'm going to try to practice more and do it slowly, kind of like what I did with the hikes, where it's like little things, because it can even be little things where sometimes when a waiter gets my order wrong and it's very slightly wrong and it's not that big of a deal, I won't say anything because I don't want to be a hassle. But it's like that's a situation where it's like I could practice leaning into discomfort there and be like, hey, sorry, like this is actually what I ordered. Like I really appreciate it. Just being like polite about it, but like letting them know. Or even like little things, like I'll notice like that I like the way that someone dresses or that I think they look pretty today, but I'll be too anxious to tell them. I'm just going to start complimenting people. Because if they don't like it, whatever, I'm not going to harass them. I'm not going to run them down to tell them that. I'm not going to compliment them in a creepy way. I'm not going to say anything weird. I'm just going to start practicing making these little things a small talk and not worrying about how they're received. And like even on dating apps, it's like I'm gonna say whatever the heck I want to anyone, and I'm not gonna be an asshole. I'm not gonna be creepy because that's not who I am. But it's like I'm gonna say things that I think are funny or that are cute or that I think are good openers and not worry about how they receive it because that's not my business. That's not my problem. If they don't like it, they can just ghost me and not reply, and that doesn't matter. Same thing on dates. I'm gonna use dating as practice, talking to people and like learning how to interact with different people and just being who I am and not having to like worry about what I'm saying as much and worry about how it's going to be received, and instead making it about just saying whatever I want and doing whatever I want in the absence of having it be a situation where I'm doing it with the intention of wanting it to be received a certain way. I'm just going to be how I am. And I've already been getting better at doing that, like being more authentic to myself. And I've gotten way better at it. And I'm the closest to being my authentic self than I've ever been before. But I'm going to try to hone that even more just by taking away that filter, that internal filter where it's like I'm overthinking and hedging on things that I want to say out of fear of how someone might respond to it, because like ultimately it's like it'll help me weed out the wrong people, or if someone does misunderstand me and they are the right person, they're going to ask more and they're going to look a little deeper instead of just immediately judging me. And if I stop filtering as much, it removes a lot of anxiety and stress from my life, because that social filter, like being not neurodivergent, has been something since I was like really, really young, like as young as like kindergarten, grade 1, where I've been filtering myself and making it my responsibility to try to change myself and try to alter my behavior to be catering towards how someone else reacts to it, instead of just doing it and like having their reaction be their responsibility, and like learning how to cope with the fact that it's like if it makes them feel a certain way and they don't voice it to me, that's not my problem. That ultimately if someone's rubbed the wrong way by something I say, it's like their problem to voice that, instead of my problem to constantly be worrying and trying to respond in a way where the intent is to try to elicit a certain response from that person. And it's not to say that's not my responsibility to like behave in a respectful manner around people, because I believe that, but like ultimately if someone misinterprets something that I said, or if they feel like I'm annoying or they don't like certain parts of who I am, it's their responsibility to voice that or to respond accordingly through their actions to make that clear. It's not my responsibility to preemptively worry about what may or may not be. So that's something that I'm really going to lead into this year for. I have a bunch of adventures planned. I'm going to be going on a lot of hikes, and I have some road trips planned, and there's just a lot of things that I want to do, especially as the weather gets better. So like I want 2025 to be the year that I truly live, and that I'm living for myself, and that I'm doing things the way that I want to do, and that I'm just being as authentic as I can be to myself, and just like really living. That's kind of what I want this year to be about. So the podcast might shift a little bit to be a bit more like lifestyle based. There's still going to be heavy horse content, but I think that like my perspective shift towards horses has been brought about in a lot of ways by these external causes that are not directly related to horses, like interactions with people and like what I've learned through them, and just like different things where I've found out more about myself and what I've learned from that. And so the podcast might be more about talking about things like that, and I'm going to be sharing about my hikes more, and like that's what my Patreon's going to share about more too, where there's going to be horse training content and stuff. There's also going to be lifestyle based content and stuff. So thank you for everyone for listening. Right now, I'm kind of in like a transitional stage where it's like until my friend moves in with me in April and I have a roommate again, like there definitely is some financial strain, which sucks. So these next couple months are kind of just be hopefully building towards something that's going to be a little bit more secure and stable. But I feel like things will come together as they're meant to. So I do feel like good-ish about that. Like it still sucks, like not to downplay that. So anyways, if you're interested in subscribing to Patreon, now would be a great time. The link to do so is going to be in the podcast notes. I also have some really big clearance sales ongoing in my store with certain bridles discounted to $75 Canadian, which is just $52 US. And there's also a bunch of apparel and stuff on sale as well for really cheap. Now would be a great time to shop. And yeah, so if you're interested in supporting the podcast through any of those avenues or through one-time donations or through purchasing a webinar or anything, all of those links are down below in the podcast description. And really appreciate all of you. Thank you for listening. Let me know your thoughts. Please comment on the podcast. I just finally got Spotify for creators, so now I can actually respond to your comments, and I can also read your reviews and stuff. So I really appreciate all of that. If you have it in your heart to review the podcast, it really does help the algorithm. Commenting on the episodes helps the algorithm. Liking the episodes helps the algorithm. Sharing them, all of that stuff. You can support the podcast entirely for free by reviewing, liking comments, posting your own comments, sharing the episodes, and do any of that on any of my socials as well. Liking posts, sharing posts, commenting on them. All of that stuff helps. I'm trying to get my YouTube up and running more. I just posted an original poem that I worked really hard on to my YouTube channel. The YouTube channel is also linked in the podcast notes, and you can check that out there. It's really meaningful to me. I worked really hard on it and I like it a lot. So I would love if you would check it out and yeah, support my work for free just by liking, commenting, sharing. It means a lot, and it does help a lot through these hard times with providing me like some level of security, because honestly, working for myself is great in a lot of ways, but it is less secure because my income fluctuates quite a bit from month to month. I never really fully know exactly how much I'm going to make each month. So on months where I'm coming up short, I just have to find new avenues to earn money or pick up more clients and stuff. And that can be really stressful, especially when I have a wrench thrown in my plans like this. And then also to top it all off, like I had this person bail on me for moving out, right? And like one of the comments I made to her, which I might have jinxed this, I was like, like it is hard because like, for example, like if I have a vet bill or something that comes up, it just adds to it where it's like now I have an extra $1,300 a month that I have to pay because I don't have a roommate. But then like a vet bill on top of that, I can make it so that my extra expenses are now in the 2,000s, 3,000s, etc. And that can be really stressful. Anyways, Harlow got a big cellulitis episode in her leg, and I'm like $800 deep in antibiotics. So I jinxed it. So anyways, don't recommend that, but that's another stressor that's been added that I just kind of have to deal with and cope with. So anyways, your support is much appreciated. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I hope it was like somewhat interesting and educational. I know it was heavy on talking about people relationships, but honestly, one, those are the most big things that have recently happened that are the clearest in my mind to talk about, because like a lot of the earlier parts of 2024 were just about self-development and focusing on myself and kind of going inward and stuff. So it was like less big moments and more like a slower shift that kind of like is culminating in these big moments that have happened recently have just kind of brought it full circle, where now I feel like right now at this point of this year, like I'm at a similar point to where I was at this point last year, but with more knowledge and more ability and more of a backbone to kind of continue that learning journey and really follow through and like complete that process and doing those things that I enjoyed and like living my life in the way that I was starting to last year. It's kind of like more solidified in that, and I'm going to continue on a similar journey, but be in a better position to really continue chasing the life that I want. Anyways, let me know your thoughts. Thank you so much for listening. I hope everyone is having a good start to the new year. I'm really looking forward to spring, summer, and I have some big things in the plans, and I'm excited to share them. So thank you for listening, and love you all. Thank you so much for tuning into the Making Milestones podcast this week. If you are interested in ways that you can help support the podcast, it would be greatly appreciated if you would leave a review wherever you listen to podcasts. Reviews help to promote the podcast in the algorithm, allowing me to connect with new listeners, and it is so greatly appreciated. Some other ways you can help to support the podcast include subscribing to my Patreon channel, where you can subscribe for as little as $1 a month and access monthly Q&As, behind-the-scenes content, training help, and more. Every subscription helps, and they help to offset any costs associated with the podcast, allowing me to keep most of these episodes ad-free. I also have an online store where I sell equestrian athletic apparel, graphic t-shirt and hoodie designs, horse bridles, both bitted and bitless, and you can check that out in the podcast description as well. Lastly, I have my main website where I have a bunch of webinars with different types of training topics, and where I also offer online training consultations if you want a one-on-one appointment with me. All of this helps me continue doing what I'm doing, and your support is so appreciated.